you got to understand the context. He's in Philadelphia, and he's speaking in front of a muted audience. They clap from time to time, but it's not one of those raucous 20,000 people in the stands in Texas, or it's, a victory speech after one of his wins in Iowa or South Carolina. It's a much more muted reaction, and he's at a podium, and he's got the flags behind him. And so it doesn't, like, in some ways, it doesn't have the power of some of those speeches as you get the thunderous crowd noise behind it, right? But listen to the words, because the words in this speech are probably the best of any of his speeches. So, let me set the theme for you before we hit you with the first clip. The theme is, the very first words he said, "We the people, in order to form a more perfect union." That is, of course, taken from what they started in Philadelphia a long time ago, our founding fathers. And he said, look, it is to form a more perfect union. We weren't there, and he said we didn't start perfect when the Constitution started. And he said the document they produced, meaning the founding fathers, was eventually signed but ultimately unfinished. And that, and this is the theme of the speech, that we continue to perfect that union and perfect that Constitution as we go through the different generations. And some are stuck in some different time frames, as Reverend Wright is to some degree, and Obama explains that. But together, we can make this document better and better and make it more real for us. And now, having said that, he starts with his own life story. So that gives you the first clip. Here you go.
I'm the son of a black man from Kenya and a white woman from Kansas. I was raised with the help of a white grandfather who survived a depression to serve in Patton's army during World War II, and a white grandmother who worked on a bomber assembly line at Fort Leavenworth while he was overseas. I've gone to some of the best schools in America, and I've lived in one of the world's poorest nations. I am married to a black American who carries within her the blood of slaves and slave owners, an inheritance we pass on to our two precious daughters. I have brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews, uncles, and cousins of every race and every hue scattered across 3 continents. And for as long as I live, I will never forget that in no other country on earth is my story even possible. It's a story that hasn't made me the most conventional of candidates, but it is a story that has seared into my genetic makeup the idea that this nation is more than the sum of its parts, that out of many, we are truly one.
Out of many, we are truly one. I am the son of a black man. All right. Look, we've heard this story many times before, but
I'm the son of a black man.
That's a good. You're damn right you are. It's a soldier. All right. Now, we heard this story many times before, but he has to set the background for what he's about to tell you. And given that this story is true, he really is in a unique position to be able to tell the story of America. Because as you hear the speech and as you look at him and as he sets that background for you, you think, this guy is America. Out of all of that he described, the black and the white and the slaves and the slave owners and all those generations, out of many we are one, and it's Barack Obama. Now, there's other biracial folks in the country, and they don't get to stand up for president and be like, hey, look, out of many, I'm the one. Right? He's good. I mean, not only at speech giving, not only in his credentials, but also, let's get real here, too. He's a very good politician. But it's not just being a politician. Now, to give credit to Obama, you don't write these ideas down and you don't give this speech if you don't know what America's really about. And he does. So, this is his life story. Now we get to what he says is, look, what's happening, let's get real. What's happening in black churches and black communities across the nation. Some good, some bad, and that happens to white communities as well, as he'll explain a little bit later. But here's clip number 2.
Like other predominantly black churches across the country, Trinity embodies the black community in its entirety. The doctor and the welfare mom, the model student and the former gangbanger. Like other black churches, Trinity's services are full of raucous laughter and sometimes bawdy humor. They are full of dancing and clapping and screaming and shouting that may seem jarring to the untrained ear. The church contains in full the kindness and cruelty, the fierce intelligence and the shocking ignorance, the struggles and successes, the love, and yes, the bitterness and biases that make up the black experience in America. And this helps explain, perhaps, my relationship with Reverend Wright. As imperfect as he may be, he has been like family to me. He strengthens my faith, officiated my wedding, and baptized my children. Not once in my conversations with him have I heard him talk about any ethnic group in derogatory terms, or treat whites with whom he interacted with anything but courtesy and respect. He contains within him the contradictions, the good and the bad, of the community that he has served diligently for so many years. I can no more disown him than I can disown the black community. I can no more disown him than I can disown my white grandmother, a woman who helped raise me, a woman who sacrificed again and again for me, a woman who loves me as much as she loves anything in this world, but a woman who once confessed her fear of black men who passed her by on the street, and who on more than one occasion has uttered racial or ethnic stereotypes that made me cringe. These people are part of me, and they are part of America, this country that I love.
These people are a part of me.
I'm the son of a black man.
These people are a part of America, a country that I love. Oh, come on. Okay. And he says, look, this is an important point. Because those of you among you who have not heard some comments with racial overtones that you were uncomfortable with from loved ones, parents, family, friends, raise your hand. I can't raise my hand. Can any of you raise your hand? I can't. I have heard so many of those in my life, and if I had to disown every single person who said one of those things, I don't think I'd have anybody left. And he's bringing that reality forward. He's saying, look, I mean, he had to throw his grandmother under a bus to do it here, but he's like, look, Grandma, as much as I love her more than anyone else I've ever been with, you know, my mom, my grandma, these are the people that raised me, but she said some things that are kind of questionable, right? And my pastor, as much as I love him, and he baptized my children, and he, married me and my wife, he says some things that I disagree with, and that make me uncomfortable. But I love that he had the courage to say, I cannot disown him, because it would be disowning the whole black community. I think he's exactly right there, and that took some courage. He could have easily thrown Reverend Wright under the bus and said, hey, I'm done with him, okay? But he didn't, and I respect him for that. I really do. Now, we're coming to the heart of the speech here. First, JR, you want to jump in?
And at the end of it all, just to say, oh, I don't like that guy, it's not going to answer the question. It's not going to get people to say, oh, well, okay, it's fine now. He got rid of him. No, because they're still going to say, well, you were there for so long. What kind of thoughts are you harboring? He's saying exactly who he is, why he ever associated with the guy, and what he feels about him right now. So it's answering the question instead of throwing water on the fire that people built up.
Right.
But you're just trying to silence people. Instead, somebody asks a question. Most politicians don't answer.
You know, that is exactly right, Jared. This is a far more thorough explanation and a much smarter explanation, and an explanation that goes to the root of the problem, not of Jeremiah Wright, but of this country. So now, in that light, he addresses, this is the longest clip, and we'll let it go for a while because this is the heart of the speech, the black and the white racial problems in the country and the racial stalemate, as he calls it, that we've come to. And it's about damn time somebody laid the cards on the table and said, this is what's going on in the country. Now, how do we get beyond it? So here he is. Senator
For the men and women of Reverend Wright's generation, the memories of humiliation and doubt and fear have not gone away, nor is the anger and the bitterness of those years. That anger may not get expressed in public, in front of white coworkers or white friends, but it does find voice in the barber shop or the beauty shop, around the kitchen table. At times, that anger is exploited by politicians to gin up votes along racial lines or to make up for a politician's own failings. And occasionally, it finds voice in the church on Sunday morning, in the pulpit and in the pews. The fact that so many people are surprised to hear that anger in some of Reverend Wright's sermons simply reminds us of the old truism that the most segregated hour of American life occurs on Sunday morning. That anger is not always productive. Indeed, all too often, it distracts attention from solving real problems. It keeps us from squarely facing our own complicity within the African American community in our own condition. It prevents the African American community from forging the alliances it needs to bring about real change. But the anger is real. It is powerful. And to simply wish it away, to condemn it without understanding its roots, only serves to widen the chasm of misunderstanding that exists between the races. In fact, a similar anger exists within segments of the white community. Most working and middle-class white Americans don't feel that they've been particularly privileged by their race. Their experience is the immigrant experience. As far as they're concerned, no one handed them anything. They built it from scratch. They've worked hard all their lives, many times only to see their jobs shipped overseas or their pensions dumped after a lifetime of labor. They are anxious about their futures, and they feel their dreams slipping away. And in an era of stagnant wages and global competition, opportunity comes to be seen as a zero-sum game in which your dreams come at my expense. So when they are told to bus their children to a school across town, when they hear an African American is getting an advantage in landing a good job or a spot in a good college because of an injustice that they themselves never committed, when they're told that their fears about crime in urban neighborhoods are somehow prejudice, resentment builds over time. Like the anger within the black community, these resentments aren't always expressed in polite company, but they have helped shape the political landscape for at least a generation. Anger over welfare and affirmative action helped forge the Reagan coalition. Politicians routinely exploited fears of crime for their own electoral ends. Talk show hosts and conservative commentators built entire careers unmasking bogus claims of racism while dismissing legitimate discussions of racial injustice and inequality as mere political correctness or reverse racism. And just as black anger often proved counterproductive, so have these white resentments distracted attention from the real culprits of the middle-class squeeze. A corporate culture rife with inside dealing, questionable accounting practices, and short-term greed. A Washington dominated by lobbyists and special interests. Economic policies that favor the few over the many. And yet to wish away the resentments of white Americans, to label them as misguided or even racist, without recognizing they are grounded in legitimate concerns, this too widens the racial divide and blocks the path to understanding. This is where we are right now. It's a racial stalemate we've been stuck in for years. And contrary to the claims of some of my critics, black and white, I have never been so naive as to believe that we can get beyond our racial divisions in a single election cycle or with a single candidate, particularly a candidacy as imperfect as my own. But I have asserted a firm conviction, a conviction rooted in my faith in God and my faith in the American people, that working together, we can move beyond some of our old racial wounds, and that, in fact, we have no choice. We have no choice if we are to continue on the path of a more perfect union.
Indeed, Brother Obama. Look, I haven't, maybe I haven't been paying close enough attention, but I haven't seen a black leader address the concerns of white folks as eloquently and as accurately as he did there. He said, look, the point of all of this is understand where we came from. Understand why the anger is real, as he said. Understand that Reverend Jeremiah Wright's generation is a different generation that lived through that, not just the discrimination we live through now, but a much more substantial discrimination, where they get fire hosed and they got beaten in the South, etc., and they couldn't drink from the same fountains. Now, understand where that angerness and bitterness is coming from, because it was justified in the past. But now we've got to move beyond that, and black folks also have to understand where white folks are coming from and how they've been told by conservative talk show hosts. And later he talks about and blames the Reagan coalition, which is also courageous. And he says they were made to believe that other people were at fault. And you have to understand it from their perspective. They feel like, hey, I didn't get anything handed to me. Why should anybody get anything handed to them? Now, we understand this context, so let's understand each other better and work towards that more perfect union. And now we're going to get to the part where he even reaches out to conservatives, says why Reverend Wright was so wrong about the statements that he made, and I think has my favorite line in here and hits the nail on the head on what's great about America. Barack Obama.
Ironically, this quintessentially American and, yes, conservative notion of self-help found frequent expression in Reverend Wright's sermons. But what my former pastor too often failed to understand is that embarking on a program of self-help also requires a belief that society can change. The profound mistake of Reverend Wright's sermons is not that he spoke about racism in our society. It's that he spoke as if our society was static, as if no progress had been made, as if this country, a country that has made it possible for one of his own members to run for the highest office in the land and build a coalition of white and black, Latino, Asian, rich, poor, young, and old, is still irrevocably bound to a tragic past. What we know, what we have seen, is that America can change. That is the true genius of this nation. What we have already achieved gives us hope, the audacity to hope for what we can and must achieve tomorrow.
Here's the line that I love. America can change. That is the true genius of this nation. There's a man who understands this country, who understands what it was built for. That's why I love this speech and why I support Obama's candidacy. Now, this is towards the end of his speech, and he says, let's find a way to move beyond all of this.
For we have a choice in this country. We can accept a politics that breeds division and conflict and cynicism. We can tackle race only as spectacle, as we did in the O.J. trial, or in the wake of tragedy, as we did in the aftermath of Katrina, or as fodder for the nightly news. We can play Reverend Wright's sermons on every channel, every day, and talk about them from now until the election, and make the only question in this campaign whether or not the American people think that I somehow believe or sympathize with his most offensive words. We can pounce on some gaffe by a Hillary supporter as evidence that she's playing the race card, or we can speculate on whether white men will all flock to John McCain in the general election regardless of his policies. We can do that. But if we do, I can tell you that in the next election, we'll be talking about some other distraction. And then another one. And then another one. And nothing will change. That is one option. Or, at this moment, in this election, we can come together and say, not this time.
Not this time. Oh, no, you don't. Who doesn't love this guy? All right. Here's one final quote for you. Your dreams do not have to come at the expense of my dreams. Bringing the country together.